All right, good morning, everybody. Gonna be a couple days before I can go fishing again. Just the way this time of year is. Um, my job that I have, this is one of the busiest times of the year. So schedules aren't always. We don't get to pick and choose. We don't really get to put in vacation times this time of year. Kind of have to just deal with whatever days I get and deal with whatever days of fishing I get. That's why you see me fishing, and it doesn't really. I'm blessed to, honestly. The snow really doesn't bother me. The cold really doesn't bother me unless it gets way below 32. As long as it's just going to be below 32 for a little bit, I can usually deal with it. But until there's snow on the ground and different things, it really doesn't bother me that much. Last year, I was out in the kayak fishing, and there was snow on the ground. So this year, I'm blessed. The good Lord's give me a boat to be able to go in. So, Lord willing, I'll have the health and time to go. One of the things that came to mind, though, that I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about is I get comments a couple times about, man, doesn't clear water bother you? Isn't it a challenge? Yes, it is a challenge. Okay, clear water is, to be honest with you, is something that a lot of people is discouraging. It's kind of intimidating because, and I didn't really think about it that much at first until this year, when I started spending a lot of time on Cumberland, especially, but I also started spending time at another little local lake that it's very clear. It's actually clearer than Cumberland is a lot of times. What I did was I went to that little smaller lake, and I challenged myself to do things different than what I used to do. And that's why a lot of times, believe it or not, I'm not always throwing a jig. I'm not always throwing a soft plastic. That's one of the reasons why I've challenged myself to do things a little bit different. Yes, those things can always get you a bite for the most part, but the issue is you never really get to see the lake. You really never get to see and cover water. You say, well, why would I want to cover water? Well, the whole purpose of covering water is not just finding where the fish are, but also learning the lake, learning where you're at. One of the ways that I've discovered that I love to do, which is awesome, but also is very rewarding and very, it pays back quite a bit, is topwater. What we don't understand is that a lot of times, most of us, our favorite time to go fishing is in the spring. Why? Because we go up there on the bank and we catch and we fish, and we catch fish and we catch fish, and we got, we have big fish days, we have all this stuff, and we're just, oh man, and we all go back home early summer and we're like, oh, it's too hot, I'm going home. But we've stood around, we bragged about how many big fish we've caught. Well, the truth is, it was a little bit easier because the water a lot of times is muddy. And that actually made it easier for us to catch the fish. We don't realize that, but it is. Not only that, but the fish were actually up shallow for a purpose. They were up there feeding, they were up there spawning. So the majority of the fish were shallow. So when we went to go catch those fish, they weren't really hiding. They were out in the open. So a lot of it, we just happened to be at the right place at the right time. It's kind of like a lot of the people that like to go fishing when, like I get asked a lot, why in the world do you like going fishing when it's raining? Why in the world do you like going fishing when it's a cloudy day and it's cold and it's chilly? Well, believe it or not, because if it's like that for a couple of days, not as many people are fishing, therefore the fish don't get as much pressure. Therefore those fish around certain spots, around banks, points, different things, nobody's bothered them for a couple of days. So when I go get to them, it's a little bit easier for me to access them, because nobody's bothered them for a couple of days. A lot of your fishermen are going to go out on these nice, pretty sunny days, and then they're wondering, well, how come I didn't catch any fish? Well, what'd you use? Well, I covered the same 100-foot bank that I always cover, and I used the same jig or the same bait that I've always used, and I don't understand what happened today. Well, nothing that's wrong with your bait, but maybe you weren't in the right spot. Maybe you didn't go to enough places. Maybe you should have switched spots. So the way I've learned that is topwater. Not just any topwater, though. I'm going to flip this view around here in just a little bit, and we're going to talk specifically about certain topwaters that I use. But in clear water, for some reason, I've really learned that you can have a day to where, man, I was throwing them real good on a crankbait. I was catching them real good on a crankbait yesterday. It was windy. There was a mud line. The water was muddy. Well, I came back here 2 or 3 weeks from now, and oh my goodness, it's a foot lower, and I can't seem to get a bite. What's the air? What's the conditions like? And you say, well, it's not windy. It's slick calm. Okay. I went down through there with my crankbait and I couldn't get a bite. It doesn't really surprise me. What do you mean? Well, what's the water clarity? Well, I don't know. You could see about 3 or 4 feet down. Okay. So that's it. You really didn't. No, that's it. I don't know. I don't understand. Well, did you try any topwater? Well, no. What time of year was it? Well, it was one of those little spring or summer days, maybe even in the fall. Did you throw any topwater? Well, no, I don't ever throw topwater. I always throw that jig, or I always throw that crankbait, or I always did. Well, you might want to consider topwater next time you go. Why? Because on that clear, slick day, a lot of the fish are hugging tight to whatever they're around, okay? They're not, a lot of times, going to run out and grab things that are just coming by, because believe it or not, a lot of times you can't get a bait. You wonder why deflection catches fish. It's because it's a sudden change in movement. A lot of times, okay? That bait was coming down through there just normal, and all of a sudden it switched directions. The speed changed twice as fast. So they're reacting. The topwater, number one, if they're looking straight up, they can't see it 100% clearly. A lot of times you'll see the baits that I use, they're clear. So they're not going to be able to see the bait clearly, number one. Number two, the way the bait's moving, it's giving them the opportunity to think that it's an easy meal. So that's what you're after. I can slow down my presentation. Watch some of these videos and these guys, and everybody's already going to say, buzzbait, whopper plopper. Great baits. I've seen a lot of people catch a lot of fish on them. I'm not very successful with them. Okay? I'm not very successful with them. I'm just not. You may be the best ever with them. And I'm happy for you if you are. And I'm not telling you not to keep using them. But these baits right here is what I use, and I'm successful with them. That I'm getting ready to show you. Watch those videos of those guys that you are good with those buzz baits, that are good with those water ploppers. And a lot of times they're going to be telling you that if you can slow down your presentation and be patient, you'll catch more fish. If you can learn to do that with these poppers and these walking baits, to where it's not about how fast I can get that bait to walk to me. You'll see a lot of times, now I've seen you work that popper and you work it pretty fast. Yeah, but there's a pause in between it. Kind of like a jerk bait. Twitch, twitch, pause. And that pause a lot of times is when they come up and they snatch it and grab it. Or when it first starts to move again, they'll come up and grab it. it's giving them a chance to think that they have an opportunity. Remember, spotted bass, largemouth, smallmouth, all those different types of bass, they feed as a predator. They come up and they like to sneak up behind. They like to surprise. A largemouth will come up and it'll sound like a big camouflage whenever they get something. Spotted bass will come up and it just straight up smacks it. Smallmouth will come up and it's almost, to me, like a striper bite. Like when they hit it, they're hitting it with so much force, they intend to kill it. It's unreal to me. That's probably my favorite bite. But let's just let me switch this view around. I'll talk to you a little bit about it. We'll go from there. All right, so we switched the angle around a little bit. We're going to talk just a minute about topwater. These are pretty much, like I said, the two that I've narrowed down. Now, I know there's plenty others. There's people that use the buzz baits. Personally, I just never have been real successful with buzz baits. I've caught a few nice fish over the years, but to be honest with you, the amount of big fish that I've caught, the amount of just numbers of fish I've caught, the amount of fish that I've had that have come off, I'm not a buzz bait guy, okay? I tried for a little while the whopper plopper in several different sizes. To be honest with you, I'm not very impressed with it either. And you say, oh man, that's the best topwater that's ever been. Well, that goes back to, you have your favorite brand of drill, and I have my favorite brand of drill. And your brand of drill may have never let you down. These are my drills that have never let me down. Okay, these are my versions of topwater that this is what I use. Okay, Sammy 100. Sammy 100. Friend of mine's the one who actually told us about this bait years ago. Good grief, probably over 15 years ago. All I ever threw was some type of little chugging bait or Rebel Poppers or something that way, but started using these walking baits and really got impressed with them. But of course, I make those little feathers and put them on my baits too. But I've really gotten into here lately and throwing these, especially in this clear water. If you walk those side by side, you'd be absolutely amazed at how those big smallmouth would come straight up and just absolutely just blast it. I mean, the sound that they make is amazing. This one here is S&M Lures. I haven't gotten a chance to catch anything on it yet because I kind of got it late in the year. But that's their version of that same style of a Sammy. This is more of a, looks a lot like the Mega Bass Dog X, is what it's supposed to mimic. It walks very well as well. It has a little bit of a spitting action, both of these do, but mostly it has that side to side walk to them. You hear a lot of people talking about covering water with them, okay? So what most people tend to do is, what they want to do is they want to work it back to them from left to right as fast as they can. I'm going to tell you something about topwater. Topwater, if you really want to catch fish on topwater, you need to slow down. If you watch videos about people with buzz baits, the one thing you're going to hear a lot of people talk about, oh yeah, I can cover a lot of water with that buzz bait. Find you a couple of videos on YouTube about buzz baits and listen very closely to what those guys are telling you. A lot of them, if they're actually a very good buzz bait, they're actually going to tell you that the slower you can crawl that buzz bait, the more opportunity you're going to get to catch a fish, especially if you do it around the lay down or something. Those whopper ploppers, the same thing. It's not about how fast you can reel that buzzbait or how fast you can reel that whopper plopper. It's taking your time and going slow. The slower you can creep that thing and still make it churn or still make it do its noise, you'll be surprised. It's the same thing with these topwaters. So here's the thing. Here's the key that I'm trying to get to, okay? Clear water. You can come through that clear water with a crankbait, bouncing around, deflecting off things. And some days you'll get bites here and there, don't get me wrong. But for some reason, you can bring a topwater, work it very slow over the surface of them, left to right, make it look like it's an injured baitfish, and they will absolutely charge it. I think it's because it triggers in them a feeding that, hey, that's an easy meal, I'm gonna go get it. They're spending a lot of energy to come up and to grab it, but I really don't think they're sitting there calculating in their mind like we think they are. But I do think they think it's an easy meal, okay? So I do cover water with it, but I walk it fairly slow. And definitely right to left, and give it a chance to actually go right to left. All right, now let's talk just a little bit about the other one. This right here is a Rio Rico popper. Now I used to have the Rebel pop bars. I think I still got one. I think I've got the R71. I didn't ever have the R70, but I've got R71. So the Rio Rico, what's the deal with the Rio Rico? The pop that it makes is super loud, which a lot of times that's what they're after. Now, it's not about using this popper like in the ocean. You're not looking to pull this bait as hard as you can pull it. Most of the time, you can watch some of the videos that I have, most of the time, yes, I am making a pretty good pop with it, but a lot of the times it's 3 or 4 pops in a row. What that's doing is that's mimicking a couple little bait fish here and there, or a struggling bait fish again. Okay, a bluegill up there, and he's trying his best, and he's flapping because he's upset that he can't get around the way he wants to. This also becomes an extremely, and I didn't get, there was a couple of times that I went, especially to Cumberland, that I didn't get a lot of the, I didn't get a lot of it on video that I wanted to, but I was throwing this around some of those submerged trees that were in probably 30 foot of water, and they were coming up, and you could see almost the tree all the way down, probably 10 to 12 feet. The water was so clear, and I was throwing this over top of them, and they were coming, those spotted bass were coming directly out of those trees to come after this popper. So in that clear water, a lot of times it kind of terrifies us a little bit. It kind of, oh man, I can't seem to get a bite. A lot of times we go the opposite direction. We think, well, I need to get this little spinning rod, and I need to get this light line. And sure, sometimes that works. Sometimes I better throw this jig in there and take my time and drag it around. Sure, sometimes that works. But I'm telling you, you'd be surprised how many times you can take a topwater and throw it over there, and it just might surprise you, even in the middle of the day. One of the biggest smallmouth that I caught last year, well, actually the biggest smallmouth I've caught so far this year was 21 inches, and it was on that topwater Sammy bait, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was on a shady bank in about 20 feet of water, and it came straight up out of boulders and absolutely just annihilated. It sounded like it exploded on that Sammy. So it can happen any time of the day, and it's a lot of fun. What did I catch in between that? Believe it or not, what I caught in between that, a lot of people probably would have left that bank, because I was catching a lot of little spotted bass. They were probably about 11 or 12 inches. I was catching one here and there, or they were just coming up and smacking at it. I even caught a little bluegill a little bit right before I caught that fish. So they were all on that bank, all of them feeding on that one side. And I had already caught one that morning on a point, and then I had caught, actually I had another one that's probably the same size as that 21-incher, hit that salmon and come off on another secondary point. And then that 21-incher was on a bluff wall. So there's not always a rhyme or reason. A lot of the theories that people have of what would be good and what wouldn't be good, a lot of times that has nothing to do with it. Okay, that I've learned anyway. So we'll go back here, but that's the two different styles. As you can see, this little bait right here, it's kind of been to war, but it still works.